So in this video, I'm gonna tell you how you can build just about any app with Bubble. And I'm gonna be telling you my shortcuts, my blueprint that you can follow in order to take an app that you want to build, take an idea and separate it into various steps, various components that will lead you on the right path to building just about any app. And the first thing I want to do is I want to show you Bubble's showcase. Okay, if you are wondering either what kind of apps you can build with Bubble, or if you are wondering how hard is it to build an app that you have an idea for already, this is going to help you quite a bit. So if you go to bubble.io/showcase, you're going to see no-code apps built on Bubble. And this is going to give you ideas, hopefully for you, in order to take perhaps a thought that you have, some kind of an idea perhaps, and turn it into an app. So we have various apps. This is actually tours in Dubai, in United Arab Emirates. We have Nestle, take control of your medical career. We have a lot of these apps, and that pretty much means that you can build just about any app that you want in Bubble. At least you can build a prototype of it. You can start getting feedback and start feeling out the market. And so the first thing you have to understand when it comes to building these apps is that it's very, very important to focus more on the business side. The technical side is also important, and the best part is that the technical side is mostly solved with Bubble, because Bubble is a no-code platform. So all the coding, all the stuff, all the intricate things with learning code and all the minute details, debugging, and all that crazy stuff that people with that work with code have to deal with, you don't really need to deal with this as much. Now, of course, granted, you still need to build it correctly. It's still, you still have to be a little bit technical. And that is why I have tons of videos on my channel. You can find my Bubble playlist in the description below. But having said that, most of your efforts, most of your thinking needs to be focused on the business side. And so what do I mean by that? Well, you have to abide with what's called a lean startup methodology. And what this essentially means is that you want to build a prototype, and this is called an MVP, which stands for a minimal viable product. And the idea here is that initially in the first version, you're not going to be building an app that includes all the features, all the functionality, all the things but the kitchen sink, so to speak, that you wanted to build. And so this is a mistake that I made a long time ago. In fact, I made this mistake a couple of times because I am very, very technical by nature. So I like to go out, I like to build things. And so what I did was I essentially built an app. I figuratively locked myself in the closet, which means that I essentially worked on that app without talking to anybody, without getting feedback, without figuring out if this app is actually going to solve a real world problem. And this is something you do not want to do, because when I finished the app, all I heard was crickets, meaning that there was not a lot of demand, there wasn't a lot of interest in the app. And so unfortunately, I had to shut down the app, because at the end of the day, it didn't really solve a lot of things. And the reason I built it was because I actually thought, I was misguided. I actually thought that, hey, this app is gonna solve a lot of problems, because I felt I had this problem and this app was helping me. That is not what you want to do. And the thinking here is that you're going to build the first version. It's going to be very, very bare, but it's going to have the functionality in order to solve a particular problem. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So let's say we go to this app here, Ocean Air. As an example, I've never seen this app before. I've never registered here. I don't know what this app is all about. I just kind of saw the screenshot, and I understand the thinking. This app, what is it trying to do, this app? This app is trying to make money, right? This app is about making money from day one, which is very, very good mentality, mindset to have. Because what they want to do is they want people that want to go on one of these tours, desert safari tours, daily tours and things, sightseeing in Dubai, Also, this eagle thing, which is very, very popular in that part of the world, is that you can go out and you can see these eagles up close. And this is what the app does, right? It's about connecting people that want these tours with the actual, providers, as you can say, these service providers, these guides, and so forth, that are actually giving you the service. And that's the kind of idea. And that is what you want to be focusing on. Everything beyond that should not be included in version 1. Just take my word for it. So this app is very nice. And the other thing you have to realize is that when you're looking at a product, whether it's a desktop app, a mobile app, a website, a web page, anything, you have to realize that their first version was a lot less refined, a lot less polished. It was uglier, so to speak, than what you're seeing now. Yes, there are chances, there are situations that, they built out a crazy, a web page, a crazy app in the first iteration. Okay, but most of the time, they iterated as a result of feedback, as a result of people telling them, hey, do you support this, or do you support that, or somebody asked a question, or somebody told them, hey, you should do this, you should do that, and then they started iterating. So remember, you want your first version just to solve the most important problem, the major problem, okay? So do not, you're not going to include all this stuff. You're not going to include probably this. Well, maybe you will include this. You're not going to include, nice graphics and all this stuff. It's going to be very, very basic because you just wanted to get it in front of people. And so that means including crazy, amazing, beautiful animations, JavaScript, all that stuff is not going to be necessary. You won't need to do like really beautiful animations and, stuff like that, crazy things. You probably won't need to do this kind of feature. All you're going to have is a search box. You're not even going to have autocomplete. So like this thing has an autocomplete. I start typing and it gives me these nice results, and it has this, and it has all this stuff. You're not going to have that in the first version. Just take my word for it. It's going to be very, very basic. Of course, as an engineer, you want things to be awesome. You want things to be refined. You don't need that for the first version. Just keep your requirements to a minimum. That is the key here. Now that we covered the basics, let's talk about the actual steps that you need in order to go out and build any app that you want. The first thing you have to be familiar with is a classic software pattern called MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller. And what that essentially is that we have three components in any kind of software design where we are interfacing with the user. So anything having a UI, anything having any kind of interface typically follows this MVC model. So let me explain to you how it works. We have a view, which is our UI. So if I have a UI, any kind of UI like this thing, this is a view here. Next thing is we have a model. A model is our database. That is where we have relationship with different data. So if I go to this app here, to this website, and I start typing something, right, like Dubai, a model would be a type of tour, right? If I scroll down, you see it has a list. These are all tours. These are all entities in the database. This is just one model, right? This is just one entity. There could be lots of different entities. You can have, an entity called a tour, an entity called maybe a different cities that you're doing tours, an entity for users, an entity for customers, right? For instance, I can log in here, right? This is a login screen. So you're going to have an entity for customers. And so this is our view here, right? So if I go in here and I type this, you can see that this is view. If I go in here and I type this, you can see this is a model right here. Okay? So you can see that's a model. This is going to have various entities. And a controller essentially connects them together. So essentially, you're going to have a link that links these together like this, right? And typically, you're going to have a bi-directional link. You're going to have a link to model, and a model is going to have a link back. So what that means is that when you load a page, it's making requests to the database. It's making requests to the database, right? And then the database sends this data back, right? So it's a bi-directional link. But the view and the whole kind of idea behind this model is something called abstraction, meaning that all the stuff that's happening here, it has no idea about the kind of the implementation of the model. This model could be a MySQL database. It could be a Postgres database. It could be in the cloud, it could be Google Cloud, it could be Firebase. This thing doesn't care. All this thing knows about is the UI, meaning like all the stuff that's happening here. And it's essentially making requests to the model. But the way the model is actually implemented, it's none of this actually components concerned. And the same thing can be said about the model, is that the model has no idea about the view. It doesn't care how this data is displayed. It doesn't care who is viewing this data, or if it's the colors and all that. It doesn't really care. All it cares about is maintaining the integrity of that data, making sure that data is not corrupted, making sure it has the proper relationship, making sure that the data is always going to be accessible, that you can always read it, you can always update it, you can always delete it, you can always write to it. That's what the model is doing. That is the key, really. And the controller basically is like a referee. It essentially, it brokers stuff from the view to model, and from the model to the view. And you can also have more complicated architectures, but this is really kind of what it comes down to. This is kind of the basic one. And this is something you kind of have to understand. You have to internalize it. Once you internalize it, everything else is going to be super, super easy. Now that you understand about kind of the basics behind the whole lean startup methodology and the MVC, the model view control and all that, let's talk about how you would go about actually building the app. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bunch of shortcuts that I think you're going to find very, very valuable. So let's say I want to build an app such as this. I want to promote tours, my tours or my customers' tours, or whatever the case may be. How do I go about building this app? Do I start with the database, the model? Do I start with the controller, the workflows in this case when we're talking about Bubble, or the logic in other systems? Do I start with the UI? Do I start building the UI? Well, I'm going to give you a bunch of pointers and tips. Typically, when I start building the app, and this is going to be an app that the user is interfacing with, we're not talking about some, an app that runs in the background or anything like that. I typically start with the UI. So what I do is I look at my app, I look at my idea, I look at what I want to do, and I start mapping out different pages. That's the first thing, right? So for instance, this thing, we have kind of a list view, right? We have a list view, and we also have a detail view. So if I click on this, it's going to open an experience. You see it says experience here, and this is a detail view. And on this detail view, there are different links, there are different things, there are different relationships, but that is all beyond. I mean, we're going to cover that in a bit. I'm trying to figure out what are the pages that the user is going to be interfacing with. Is it just going to be a list view? Is it also going to have a detail view? Is it going to have a list view and a detail view? Or maybe just a detail view? Is it going to have a profile? Is it going to have, we also have currency conversion, but that's all later on. So typically right here, we have a list view and we have a detail view. And so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to my shape tool and I'm going to say, well, this is our list view and this is our detail view. So I have two pages. I may also have a profile. Okay, I may also have a forget, password thing. I may also have another page. And so initially, you want to keep this to a minimum. You don't want to go out and create, whatever, like a little widget where you can show different currencies and all that. You want to keep this to a very minimum, okay? So for instance, if I click on this thing, that's another view, right? And I can actually learn about this tour guide. You're probably not going to implement that in the first version. And so what I start with is I start with my views, my pages. So I'm going to go into Bubble, and I'm going to start creating various pages. Because this is where everything starts. You cannot start your data, your model, your database schemas and all that unless you know exactly what the user is going to be interfacing with. Because if you build your schema and it's going to have some information, some data that is not going to be accessible from the screen, then what's the point, right? There has to be a good reason for it. And that is why I always start with things that the users are going to see. And I'm talking about all users. I'm talking about me as a customer, right? In this example, I'm also talking about the business owner. I'm talking about the provider, like this guy. He's the provider of this tour. And I am viewing it as a customer. So I'm seeing certain type of views, one set of views. And the customer is going to be seeing the business owner, the provider, the service provider is going to be seeing different kinds of views. So you have to understand that. Very, very important. So once you do that, you're going to create your things. As you're creating it, right, you're going to have different fields. And these fields are going to start forming your data model. right? They're going to start forming the actual fields in the database. That is why this is the best way of going about it. You're going to have different fields, right? We need to collect, we need to display our tours, our entities, whatever they are. In this case, these are tours. So a tour is going to have how many hours, how many people, the location, the language, the name of the title, right? The guide of the tour. All of these are going to be things. And once you're actually designing the UI, you're actually starting to design the actual model. So once you're done with the UI, the next thing you want to do is, once you're done all the pages, all the elements, you want to go out and you want to look at what you have here, and you want to start building the data model. Okay, so the data model is going to differ on the tool you choose. Okay, if we're talking about Bubble, Bubble has a relationship internally, data structure, database, an internal database that's based on relationships. So if you ever done any kind of relational database, MySQL, stuff like that, you're going to be right at home. Okay, other systems like Appgyver, it doesn't have an internal database. You have to go out and you have to connect to some external entity using APIs or Google Firebase or some of the other things. And so that depends. And so once you're done, you're going to go out, you're going to create your data model with relationship. And what you're doing is you're looking at pages. So for instance, this is a simple field, this is a simple field, simple field, simple field, simple field, right? Primitive field. But this guy here, this is going to be a relationship, right? Because you're going to have an entity with tour guides, and it's going to be a many-to-many relationship, right? So for instance, you can have, maybe you can have a tour here in this case that can have many different guides. And a guide can lead many different tours. And that's why you have a many relationships. So you're going to have one table or entity for tour guides and one entity for different tours, okay? You also have activities. You have different activities, and they're included, right? So this is going to be a many-to-many relationship. This is an experience. These are activities, and depending on, for instance, it's going to be a one-to-many relationship for sure, because this thing here has many of these, and it could be a many relationship, because we do not know. This thing actually can belong to many different experiences. It's not like this thing owns this desert dune bashing. This activity could be included in different experiences. So if it's included in different experiences, it's a many-to-many relationship. If it's not included, if it's only included in this one, if it's unique to this experience, then it's a one-to-many relationship. You guys have to kind of understand that. So that would be the second stage, building your data schemas. And I can tell you from experiences that building the UI is a lot easier. Building the schemes, you might have to try a couple of times, because when you're building your relationship, you might realize later on, like after a couple of tries, that instead of it being a many-to-many, it's actually a one-to-many. Or instead of it being one-to-many, it's a many-to-one, right? You're going to see that, but the most important thing is the experience. That's why you always start with the UI and then get the data structures, the models, configured to your UI. It needs to kind of match the UI. It's not the other way around. You don't build your data model and then build your UI. The UI is king, and then your data model is going to adapt to how your UI is built. Now, after you're done doing your UI and your data model and all of that, everything works together really nicely. Then you can go out and start linking them together, joining them, gluing them together using a controller. So with Bubble, these are going to be workflows. With another tool, maybe it's going to be logic. In Appgyver, you have logic elements. When you click on submit, maybe you're going to have a submit button here, an OK button. You click on it, and it's going to do something with the data. Maybe it's going to create a new record. Maybe you're going to view the data. It's something called CRUD, C-R-U-D, and that stands for create, read, update, delete. So you're going to have a bunch of operations. Maybe you're going to display other things. So for instance, in this case, we are showing, it's a detail view, but it's also listing different activities inside the detail view. So maybe you'll have to pull up different activities and their data as it's related, as it's connected. So in Bubble, this would be a bunch of detail fields, a bunch of fields in the experience entity, and this is going to be a list. So you're going to have activities, which is going to be a list of activities, and activities is actually another entity here. Okay? And so once you're done, you're going to connect them using your controllers. That's the way it's going to work. And so following this methodology, you can go out and you can build just about any app, any web page, anything out there. Of course, there are various details, there are various things that you're gonna deal with coming into it. And that is why in this tutorial, in this video, I want to give you kind of a general overview, right? You start with the UI, you do your data model based on the UI, and then you glue them all together using workflows in Bubble or Logic in Appgyver or whatever you have in your other tool. All tools are going to have some kind of logic because, you know, programs without logic are simply web pages. They're not apps. And so that is the way you do it. I really hope you've gotten value here. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or concerns. Maybe you're stuck on something, and I will do my best to help you out. Also, if you enjoyed this video, give this video a fat like. That really makes a huge difference to the growth of the channel, and I really, really appreciate that. And last but not least, if you're not yet subscribed and you like NoCode, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click on that notification bell as well so that you do not miss any future episodes. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you real soon.